Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. I'm Ruth Ann from Abundant Blooms Flower Farm, and today I'm going to be tackling some of those questions that you asked in the Woody series that I've just been going through, and I want to be able to answer your questions. So we're just going to dive right in. If you don't know me, I'm a flower farmer in Zone 6A. I'm in my 6th year of flower farming. I started out growing a lot of annuals, and now I've transitioned to a lot of perennials and woodies. I still grow a few annuals, but mostly perennials and woodies. And so I've done some big investments into woodies in the last several years. And so I've been enjoying sharing my woody journey with you guys here on YouTube. So before I get into it, please like and subscribe this video. That really helps me. We've just been on this great YouTube journey together, and it just is so fun. And also, if you're new to my channel, I sell flowers to florists, and so that is the focus of this channel. I want to look at a flower farm from that lens. So growing woodies is part of that because it's more of an advanced farming thing. You're setting yourself apart from other growers, and you're growing a more difficult crop. So, and in a longer invested crop because you're planting it for long term. But I do have a download, Tips for Selling Flowers to Florists. So if you haven't gotten that yet, download that and you'll be signed up for my email list as well. So just to jump into a bunch of the questions. So by far, the most asked question was like, what are my top 5 or my top 3, or where do you start? How do you even start? How should you start? That's a great question. I mean, for me, I can answer it from me. So if you're looking at the market of selling to florists, like that's what I do, I think you can't go wrong with 9-bark, smokebush, viburnum, spirea, and hydrangeas. So within that is like the top 5-ish, like what I would say. But within those, there's all kinds of varieties. There's all kinds of viburnum. There's multiple different kinds of smokebush. There's, all kinds of 9-bark. There's different hydrangeas, obviously. So that's a little bit tricky. That's kind of very broad. So I would look at like a small leaf 9-bark and a large leaf 9-bark. So like something like a ginger wine 9-bark and some kind of a tiny wine. The smokebush, I really think the Winecraft Black and the Winecraft Gold, like you just can't go wrong with those. Hydrangeas like Limelight Primes, and then lace cap hydrangeas seem to be pretty popular. And I've had a lot of my florists say that hydrangeas are kind of on an uptick, like they're becoming more popular right now, so that's helpful. I don't know, it's a little tricky because I feel like it's so specific, but 9-bark is what sold me on woodies. I mean, I'll just be really honest. I planted it, and within the first year, I've said this in previous videos, but in the very first season, so I planted it in the fall. So if you spring plant it, don't expect this, but if you fall plant it, I planted in the fall, I planted it in August of 2022, and in the summer of 2023, off of these 48 9-bark bushes, I paid for my entire woody crop. So I spent over $1,000, and I made $1,000 in woody in sales just from my 9-bark. Now it's 3 kinds of 9-bark, right? So 48 plants, but I was like, whoa, there's something to this. And my florist loved it. I sold everything I had that year because it wasn't super productive. Like now my 9-bark is more productive because it's more established, right? And so that's the other thing. They just get better and better with time. So I actually have not harvested any spirea yet, but I mean, the florists are just like desperate for it. But my spirea is really young. So it's a little tricky for me to like really speak into some of these woodies that maybe are really fabulous, but just take 3 or 4 years to establish. So they definitely do. Some of them definitely do take patience. And then this last season, I mean, this smokebush just like, it's amazing. It's less fussy than 9-bark as far as harvesting, and everybody wanted it. They all want the smoke. I mean, they all want it. So I actually have ordered more smokebush from Farmer Bailey for this year. So I have 30 smokebush more coming. I mean, what does that put me at? Like, I don't know, well over 100 smokebush. And so this will be a third variety of smoke bush, but it's the smoke bush that blooms on new wood. I've talked about this in another video as well, but the smoke, which is why it's called smoke bush, which somebody told me in Sweden it's called a wig bush. Isn't that funny? Because it looks like a wig. Like I can totally see that, like the old wigs. So interesting how we, name things. And anyway, so the smoke bush blooms on new wood, and which the traditional smoke bushes bloom on old wood. So the stuff that I have blooms on old wood. So it takes 2 years to get that smoke, which is very desirable. But like for me, I guess I would leave it if I couldn't sell my smoke bush, but I've been selling out of my foliage. So, you can't sell the plume of smoke for twice as much as you can sell the foliage. So to me, I'm like, well, I don't really want to save my stuff when I could sell it for $15 now, and I'm not going to get $30 for the smoke, maybe 20, but it's not like it's going to double in price. But anyway, so if you have an old smoke bush on your farm, I'm jealous, because I've seen some gorgeous smoke bushes when driving through neighborhoods. I'm like, oh, I wish I could cut that one. You're like, oh, there's like gold on that tree. Anyway, so I just don't think you can go wrong with 9 bark or smoke bush. And then the other would be like the hydrangeas. So I think that is definitely where I would start. So those are all very, very, very popular with florists, and they're pretty like disease resistant and pest resistant and different things. So the only other thing would be snowberries. They are so quick growing, so they're just really an encouraging woody, because you plant them and the next season you have a pretty decent harvest. If you want to know numbers on like those kinds of things, the second video in my series talks all about the first woody planting, and I go into depth of how much I've harvested off of them. So in year 1 and year 2 is how many years I've had, so showing the increase of harvest, if at all, because I haven't harvested at all off my spirea or viburnum. So, but they talk about how much smoke bush did I get on the first season, how much did I get on the second season, like average stems per plant. But yeah, the snowberries is really encouraging because it is such a great crop right off the bat, and you can pay for itself right away. And the florists really do love it. And it's so nice to have a fall thing. Like, I don't know, in the fall, you're kind of tired, and then you've just got this great berries. It's very different. Great crop. You can sell it for a good amount. So, okay, then a next question is thoughts on spacing. So I've talked about this in my other videos again, but the spacing for cut flower woodies is very, very different than spacing for landscape. I pretty much plant everything 18 to 24 inches apart. Some of my bigger smoke bush or my bigger 9 bark, my bigger hydrangeas, I'm spacing at 24 inches. Most is 18. So like my viburnums and my spirea and my snowberries, all of those are 18 inches. So, and then between rows is like 4 to 5 feet or 5 to 6 feet. Like from plant to plant, it's like 5 feet in the pathway, and then in row spacing 18 to 24 inches. Post-harvest care. So post-harvest care, I have talked about this again, mostly in that second video, but everybody asks if I split the stems, like do I cut off the stems, or I don't do that. I harvest them into something called hydrator, and I don't do this with every single woody, especially if they're more mature. But I do with, like, for sure hydrangeas, I always harvest them into hydrator. The other thing is harvesting them first thing in the morning. Do not try to harvest these midday. They will just wilt and flop and be a mess. Don't harvest woodies midday. So just harvesting them at the right time in the cool of the day, and then putting them into hydrator, getting them in the cooler. So I use the Chrysol Professional 2 hydrator. People have asked me a lot. I'll put a picture of it up, but I only use that on my woodies. I don't use that in my other flowers. So Chrysol Professional 2 hydrator, I just use it according to the directions. I don't know, it's like 1 capful per, I don't know, a couple gallons or something. Other people asked how I do availability. So I have, I will put a link in the comments, but I do have a video about like selling flowers to florists 101 or something, and I think I talk about availability in there. Basically, I use Rooted Farmers, and that's how I do all my availability. It's tricky to do advanced availability in Rooted Farmers just because of the way the platform works. So I have a lot of wedding florists that order from me way in advance, and so I've already had a florist contact me do I have smoke bush in the end of June? And so they order way in advance for the weddings, typically, especially for big, 9 barks and different things. And so I know pretty much that I'm going to have these plants. It's not like, are they going to be blooming or something? Once they're mature, you can harvest, which is one of the great things about like 9-bark and different things. You can harvest off of woodies, some of them. You can harvest the 9-barks and the smoke bush. Like they mature, let's say mid-July. I can cut off them anytime till frost. So the stem is perfectly safe, not perfectly, but mostly safe on the plant. It's not like a flower that's gonna bloom out, right? It's not gonna be done blooming and go to seed. It's a bush, right? It's got foliage. It's going to look like that the whole time. So that is great because it has a super long harvest window. I mean, like 2 months. Like you can't just leave a zinnia on a plant and be like, oh, I don't need it this week. I'll just harvest it next week. So that does help you with your predicting when your woodies are going to be ready. So yeah, I definitely do advanced ordering. And then basically what they do is they email me and then I put in a back end order into Rooted. So they can't do that because I don't have my availability projected that far, but I can put in an order saying, hey, they want 6 9-bark the first week of October, and then I put an order in, and then they can see it, and then they can add to it. So that's how I do that. It works pretty well. Just jumping in here to add something while I was editing. So some people asked about stem length. That's a great question. So I pretty much have minimum stem length of 18 inches. It's kind of standard. There are occasional flowers that's not absolute necessity, but that's pretty standard. So woodies are the same thing, 18 inches, but a lot of the woodies are more like 24 or 30. The longer the woody stem, so for example, if I cut a 9-bark stem, 30 inches as opposed to 18, it has more value to the florist. So you can charge more for it, and it's a more valuable. So I use my arm as a measuring stick. So typically from your fingertips to your anacubicle to your elbow, I was a nurse, is 18 inches. So I mean, if you don't believe me, measure from your fingertips to your AC. I use that as a measuring all the time. So I just take my fingertips, go down the stem, and when the tip comes up to my elbow, then I know it's 18 inches. Now, if you go from your fingertip to your shoulder, that's about 30 inches, roughly. So I use that when I'm cutting woodies. So I'll put the tip at my shoulder, straighten my arm, obviously, and cut the woodies from my fingertips. And that just keeps everything uniform and keeps them all basically the same length as well. So it makes it easier to keep them standard and keep the bunches standard. So that's what I do for stem length. So my big woodies and smoke bush are typically cut at the shoulder, like 30 inches. And then like my tiny wine gold 9-barks are 18 inches. My symphocarpus, my snowberries are, they're not 30 inches, but they're, a good 20 to 22 kind of inches. So that's a standard. That's how I do it. It's really helpful for cutting any flower or foliage, and it keeps it all together. The other thing that people were asking me about was my hoop house. So I had recorded the last videos in the hoop house. The hoop house is from Nifty Hoops, and they were great. I got an NRCS grant, and I put extra money toward it to get a really high quality hoop house. And so I have automatic sides that go up and down and vents that are automatic. And it's built in Michigan, or it's made in Michigan. They're a Dearborn area company, like an Ann Arbor company. And so they're very much built for wind and snow load. So that was one of the reasonings, particularly for me, going with that company, was because they were so well known for their durability in northern climates. So obviously when you're choosing what to grow, you need to think of your market, so I grow to a lot of wedding event florists. I choose a lot of like white things, like hydrangeas are blue, or something that I'm trying to fill a gap in my production. So just always know your market and go from there. So anyway, that's all for today. Thanks so much for watching this about the questions about woodies and wrapping up this woody series. And so I will see you next time. I hope you have a great day.